First in the news, the first shipment of AstraZeneca vaccines donated by the World Health Organization-led COVAX facility has finally arrived in the country. However, the Philippine government still has no rollout date for these vaccines. Rosalie Cos will tell us why live. Yes, Rosalie, good evening. Does the government have a priority list wherein the Philippines will deliver the first batch of AstraZeneca vaccines?
William, the Interim National Immunization Technical Advisory Group, or INITAG, is still finalizing the priority list of the first batch of AstraZeneca vaccines which arrived in the country. But what is clear is that all vaccine supplies for the first quarter of the year will be allocated to all healthcare workers in the country. President Rodrigo Duterte will personally lead the welcome ceremony of the first shipment of AstraZeneca vaccines from the COVAX facility.
This is a total of 487,200 doses of COVID-19 vaccines developed in South Korea and donated by 12 countries in Europe. The vaccines came from Belgium and made a stopover at Bangkok, Thailand before arriving in the Philippines through a commercial flight. Upon arrival at NAIA Terminal 3, the vaccines were towed to Villamor Air Base Kalayaan Hall for a simple ceremony led by President Rodrigo Duterte. From Villamor, it will be transported to a cold storage facility in Marikina City. AstraZeneca vaccines will be distributed the same way Sinovac vaccines were distributed. This is once the priority list of INITAG is finalized and approved by the Interagency Task Force. The AstraZeneca vaccines will be distributed first to COVID-19 referral hospitals, the other Department of Health hospitals, public hospitals, and private hospitals. Unlike Sinovac vaccines, which were distributed a day after arrival, the rollout of AstraZeneca vaccines is yet to be determined.
Aaprubahan pa po yan ng NITAG, but I don't see them deviating from the protocol that they established for Sinovac. And definitely, masusunod po yung ating national vaccination plan, providing for the different priorities.
Meanwhile, in his speech in Valenzuela City this afternoon, President Duterte reiterated he is waiting for the Sinopharm vaccines. He also revealed that China will donate another 400,000 doses of COVID-19 vaccines, apart from the 600,000 doses of Sinovac vaccines or CoronaVac.
Others might prefer other brands. The doctors are very discriminating. They're waiting for Pfizer. Ang akin is Sinopharm, China. Hindi masyado ako maano dyan sa mga produkto ng puti. So, ganun. But I will be receiving another batch. And then, China would give us another 400, making their donation to this country 1 million.
Meanwhile, the palace official reiterated that the top priority of the government in its vaccination program are the health workers. This following the vaccination of some government officials, apart from those who were directed to be vaccinated first, like Vaccine SAR and National Task Force Chief Implementer, Secretary Carlito Galvez, Deputy Chief Implementer Vince Dicen, and Metropolitan Manila Development Authority Chairman Benhur Abalos. According to the palace, there was a problem with the information dissemination, so some government officials have been inoculated already with Sinovac, such as Interior Undersecretary Jonathan Malaya and Metropolitan Manila Development Authority Chief of Staff Mike Salalima.
So ang buong akala nila, they were doing the country a service by having themselves vaccinated. No? Pero kung yun po yun, no? Talagang in good faith, hindi daw po alam ni Yusek Malaya na pinagbawal na ng NITAG. Actually, ako po, no, kamuntik na rin ako sa PGH, kung hindi naubusan sa PGH.
William, Malacanang ensures the vaccination program of the government will continue despite the 1 million doses supply of vaccine in the country as of the moment. He adds all health workers who want to be vaccinated will be accommodated and all hospitals will have an allocation of COVID-19 vaccines. Back to you, William.
Yes, thank you, Rosalie Cos, for that report on AstraZeneca vaccines. Meanwhile, the Department of Health, or DOH, warns that the Philippines may risk losing its vaccine doses from the global COVAX facility. Aiko Miguel tells us why.
The World Health Organization-led COVAX facility committed to supply free COVID-19 vaccine for the country's 20% population, or equivalent to 44 million doses of vaccines. Part of the COVAX facility's condition on the allocation of COVID-19 vaccines should be given to the priority population. This includes healthcare workers, other frontliners, and some from the vulnerable sector. This is why the World Health Organization appeals that countries like the Philippines should follow the prioritization requirements.
If we want to ensure that we continue to access the vaccines from the COVAX facility, we need to demonstrate that we can follow this prioritization. If we cannot demonstrate that we are following this prioritization, unfortunately, the COVAX may have to consider other options where the impact of the vaccine rollout will be more useful and practical and will contribute to saving more lives.
The Department of Health also appeals to not rush and let those who are prioritized to be inoculated first, for these actions may jeopardize the country's COVID-19 vaccine supply from the COVAX facility.
Kung sakasakaling makapag-violate tayo nitong objective na to na hindi natin naibigay dun sa tamang mga tao na or mga healthcare workers, maaring ma-compromise or ma-jeopardize yung mga succeeding supplies coming from COVAX facility.
According to WHO Country Representative Dr. Rabindra Abeyasinghe, aside from the more than 487,000 doses of AstraZeneca vaccines that arrived in the country, million doses of the vaccine will arrive in the COVAX facility by May. 117,000 doses of Pfizer-BioNTech COVID-19 vaccines are also expected to arrive in the country in the coming months.
We had some initial problems with setting up the mechanisms and the deliveries. We are happy to note that Philippines is receiving one of the largest consignment of COVAX vaccines.
Meanwhile, WHO and DOH said that AstraZeneca COVID-19 vaccines can still give protection against the B.1.351 COVID-19 variant, or the variant first discovered in South Africa.
We still believe that the AstraZeneca vaccine is effective even in places where you have a large proportion of cases which could be attributed to the B.1.351 variant or the South African variant. But I want to reiterate that there is no evidence of large-scale presence of this variant in the Philippines.
Sa atin naman, we like to always err on the side of caution. Pero hindi para sabihin na mawawalang bisa ang pagbabakuna natin. Gagamitin niyang AstraZeneca at itutuloy-tuloy natin ang pagbabakuna.
Experts are still studying whether booster shots are still needed to give additional protection against existing COVID-19 variants. Aiko Miguel, UNTV News and Rescue. We serve the people, we give glory to God.
The cold storage facility that received the donated Sinovac vaccines is ready for the arrival of the 487,200 doses of AstraZeneca vaccines tonight. Members of Marikina Police are on standby outside the Metropack Movers Incorporated here in Marikina City for the arrival of the vaccines. On Monday, Marikina Mayor Marcy Teodoro and vaccine czar Carlito Galvez Jr. inspected the facility to ensure that the new vaccines will be properly stored.
Sa aming pag-iikot ni Secretary Charlie Galvez at narinig ko naman sa kanya nung kausap niya ang mga namamahala dito sa storage facility at yung logistics ng DOH ay nasa ayos naman ang lahat at may maayos namang inventaryo. Yung dumating na Sinovac nung linggo ng gabi, halos makaraan ng isang araw o dalawang araw lamang ay halos ubos na.
This afternoon, some refrigerated vans containing Sinovac vaccines have been deployed to Cardinal Santos Medical Center, Chinese General Hospital, and San Lazaro Hospital. Once the vaccines arrived at the facility, it will undergo checking of temperature before unloading, inventory, and repacking, which could take 4 hours. The deployment of AstraZeneca vaccines may begin tomorrow. With the launch of the COVID-19 inoculation and the expected arrival of more anti-coronavirus shots, Cabinet Secretary Carlo Nograles sees the modified General Community Quarantine or MGCQ shift happening by the next quarter. Joanano tells us why.
President Rodrigo Duterte said he might be considering the country's shift to a more relaxed quarantine status once the initial 2 million doses of COVID-19 vaccines arrive on the first quarter of this year. According to Cabinet Secretary Carlo Nograles, the president is very happy and satisfied on the vaccination program now that the vaccine confidence of the Filipinos are increasing. With this, Secretary Nograles said that the entire Philippines might shift to modified general community quarantine on the second quarter of this 2021.
I foresee this to be something that will be in the works sa second quarter. Sa second quarter po. Baka ito na yung tamang panahon na mag-shift na tayo sa MGCQ para sa buong Pilipinas.
Apart from this, CABSEC Nograles also discloses that the president is also considering to ease the age restrictions once the initial 2 million doses of the vaccines will be delivered until early next month. This will also be the basis of the president to allow the resumption of limited face-to-face classes.
The president reiterated his stand that he wants to see a more rigorous, a more widespread rollout of the vaccination program. Ang sabi nga niya, he gave a figure like 2 million vaccines being rolled out, no, as a start. Then that's when he will start reconsidering about itong pagbubukas more openly ng ating GCQ areas.
President Duterte rejected proposal of the Metro Manila mayors as well as the economic managers on the country's shift to MGCQ, arguing that the vaccination rollout should come first before shifting to MGCQ. Meanwhile, the Interagency Task Force has reported that there were a total of 8,559 individuals that were inoculated with Sinovac vaccines since March 1 up to March 3. This was out of the 32 designated vaccination sites within Metro Manila. Based on the figures reported by the IATF, out of the 600,000 doses of Sinovac vaccines that was delivered last Sunday, 189,600 doses were delivered in various areas in the National Capital Region. 7,200 doses were brought in Cebu and 12,000 doses for Davao City. Joanano, UNTV News and Rescue. We serve the people, we give glory to God.
South Korean authorities are in the midst of an investigation after 2 people who got vaccinated by AstraZeneca COVID-19 vaccine died. And in Hong Kong, authorities investigated the death of an elderly patient 2 days after receiving a Sinovac jab. Ia De Vera details to us why live. Ia, go ahead.
JEGO, the Korea Disease Control and Prevention Agency, or KDCA, are now conducting an investigation into the incidents of 2 nursing home patients who both had pre-existing conditions and died within days after getting vaccinated against COVID-19. A 63-year-old patient with existing cerebrovascular disease developed symptoms including high fever 4 days after getting the AstraZeneca jab. He was transferred to a bigger hospital but died after showing symptoms of pneumonia and blood poisoning. Also, a 50-year-old nursing home patient with diabetes and heart condition suffered multiple heart attacks and passed away 1 day after being vaccinated. KDCA Director Jong Eun-kyung said that the agency is conducting epidemiologist surveys with relevant local authorities to confirm any link with the inoculation. Meanwhile, the Hong Kong authorities have investigated a man who passed away 2 days after receiving the Sinovac COVID-19 vaccine. The 63-year-old man with chronic and respiratory disease was transferred to a hospital due to shortness of breath and was preliminarily diagnosed with bronchitis. The Expert Committee on Clinical Events Assessment following COVID-19 made a statement after assessing the case and said that the man's death did not have have a direct link to the inoculation. A preliminary autopsy revealed that the man had serious coronary heart disease, which led to heart attack and a condition caused by excess fluid in the lungs, resulting respiratory failure. Jago, the Department of Health emphasized that there is no particularly safety concern detected from the Sinovac COVID-19 vaccine based on the available data. Jago?
Thank you, Iya De Vera, reporting live from New Zealand. The Global Police Agency revealed it had broken up a smuggling ring that trafficked counterfeit COVID-19 vaccines from China to South Africa. Kath Dumaraos tells us why.
Security officials in China and South Africa seized thousands of counterfeit doses of the coronavirus vaccine. The International Criminal Police Organization said in a statement that 400 vials equivalent to about 2,400 doses containing the fake vaccine were found at a warehouse in Germiston outside Johannesburg in South Africa. Officers also recovered fake masks and arrested 3 Chinese citizens and a Zambian national. In China, police successfully identified a network selling counterfeit COVID-19 vaccines in an investigation supported by Interpol. They raided the manufacturing premises, resulting in the arrest of around 80 suspects and seized more than 3,000 fake vaccines on the scene, it said. Interpol earlier this year issued an orange notice warning authorities worldwide to prepare for organized crime networks targeting COVID-19 vaccines, both physically and online. Interpol said that in addition to the arrests in South Africa and China, it was also receiving additional reports of fake vaccine distribution and scam attempts targeting health bodies such as nursing homes. It warned that no approved vaccines were available for sale online. Kat Dumaraos, UNTV News and Rescue. We serve the people, we give glory to God.
For those watching us on YouTube, please click the subscribe button you see on your screen and ring the bell for notification. You may also follow us on Facebook.
Employers might face administrative penalties if a no vaccine, no work policy is implemented in their workplace. Ray Pelayo tells us why.
The Department of Labor and Employment warned companies nationwide against enforcing a no vaccination, no work policy. DOLE Secretary Silvestre Bello III said the policy has no legal basis and it can be considered as discriminatory. Bello stressed that they could be held liable under the law if they fire or suspend an employee who refuses inoculation against COVID-19.
Hindi pwedeng mandatory yan. Nasa mga empleyado yan kung gusto niya magpabakuna o hindi, nasa kanya yan. Hindi pwedeng gawing mandatory. At pinag-aralan din namin na yung refusal to be vaccinated is not a ground for termination.
The Labor Secretary reiterated this after a labor group reported that several business establishments are requiring their employees to get vaccinated before they can return to work. The Associated Labor Union, Trade Union Congress of the Philippines, said that most of these reports are from call center, restaurants, and hotels. According to Alan Tanhusay, the policy floated when employers conducted a survey among its employees.
Ang sabi kasi sa kanila, ng kanilang mga employer ay hindi sila papapasukin sa kanilang mga trabaho hanggat hindi sila nagpapabakuna. Yung iba naman ay sinasabi na i-floating at i-forlow sila kapag wala pang bakuna.
The Employers Confederation of the Philippines, or ECOP, however, said they are not aware of the policy. The Labor Department will soon release a guideline on the vaccination program for employees. Ray Pelayo, UNTV News and Rescue. We serve the people. We give glory to God.
The Philippines' total COVID-19 cases climbed to 584,667 today after the Department of Health recorded 2,452 new infections. The total number of active cases stood at 37,226, or 6.4% of the overall tally. 266 more recoveries were recorded, bringing the number of survivors in the country to 535,037. The DOH also reported 15 new fatalities, pushing the death toll to 12,404. The health department encouraged local government units to further enhance their localized response against the COVID-19 pandemic.
Following a recent surge in COVID-19 active cases in Pasay City, an additional 100 contact tracers were deployed to aid the local government in its response efforts to control the spread of the coronavirus. Janice Inhente reports.
The Pasay City local government is doubling its efforts in tracing, testing, and isolating residents suspected to have contracted COVID-19. Pasay City Mayor Emmy Calixto Rubiano already sought the help of the DOH and the MMDA for additional nurses and contact tracers after the city epidemiology and surveillance team reported the alarming rise of COVID-19 cases in Pasay.
Ngayon po, meron po may mga pinadala sa Pasay na 100 po na dagdag na contact tracers. Then, siyempre, ang lahat ng ginagawa po namin, ini-intensify pa. Na dating nagkakaroon kami talaga ng mass testing, ng sobrang contact tracing, isolation, talagang mas dinodoble namin sa tulong ng ating national government at nagpapasalamat po ako syempre sa ating IATF and gayon din sa pinahiram ng mga contact tracers.
Pasay City now has 543 active cases of COVID-19. Meanwhile, the official confirmed that the 4 residents who tested positive of the variant from South Africa have already recovered from the disease.
Yes po, recovered na. Pero inuulit po namin ang kanilang swab nang makasigurado po tayo na-isolate namin agad sila. Pati po na contact trace.
Rubiano said the city government has imposed stricter protocols, reminding the residents not to be complacent, especially with the arrival of COVID-19 vaccines. At least 77 barangays have been placed under localized enhanced community quarantine, while one of these barangays is under total lockdown. Rubiano said about 210 houses of these 77 villages are now being monitored. Janice Inhente, UNTV, News and Rescue. We serve the people, we give glory to God.
The National Task Force Against COVID-19 assures of an intensified detection of cases of new variants of COVID-19 in the Philippines. Marvin Calas reports.
The UP Octa research team is alarmed that the government's effort on its vaccination program could be in vain because of the advent of coronavirus variants. It includes the emergence of B117 discovered in the United Kingdom and B1351 that was first detected in South Africa. At present, 60 confirmed cases of B117 have so far been recorded in the Philippines, while there are 6 B1351 variant cases in different parts of the country. Thus, the health authorities are urged to stop the imminent spread of COVID-19 variants through intensified testing, detection, and sequencing capabilities.
Sa testing po, tuloy-tuloy po ang pag-ramp up natin ang capability natin na ma-detect ang mga new variants. Yan po ay ginagawa ng DOH, ng Philippine Genome Center, ng RITM at iba pang mga capable na labs. No? At pinipilit natin talagang mahuli.
Secretary Vince Dizon notes that another way to prevent the transmission is the immediate vaccination of the country's healthcare workers. Additional vaccine doses are needed to vaccinate the 1.7 million healthcare workers in the Philippines.
Kailangan pa natin ng mga 2 million plus doses para maabot yung 3.4 million plus na kakailanganin natin para sa lahat ng healthcare workers natin. Pero kampante tayo na darating na itong mga doses na ito sa loob ng mga ilang buwan lang.
Secretary Vince Dizon underscores that despite the National Task Force Against COVID-19's efforts to contain the spread of the emerging variants, it is still necessary for people to comply with the minimum health standards at all times. Marvin Calas, UNTV News and Rescue. We serve the people, we give glory to God.
Non-convention ships from the Philippines will be allowed to enter the Eastern Sabah Security Zone waters starting Friday. Joanne Tongol will tell us why.
Since October 13, the Malaysian government suspended non-convention ships or merchant ships from conducting barter trade economy and transshipment activities to prevent the spread of COVID-19. These includes all water vessels or carriers that transport cargo or carries passengers for hire. Chief Minister Datuk Seri Hajiji Noor said businessmen involved in the economic activities were facing difficulties in using convention ships as the South Philippines does not have such facilities at its ports. After the assessment made by the authorities, the government has agreed to allow these ships to enter provided they follow the standard operating procedures to prevent new clusters of COVID in the future. The SOP includes the use of designated routes, the crew should be free from COVID-19, no landing party, the unloading process will be handled by local companies. Resuming the barter trade and transshipment will contribute to the state's economy. Joanne Tongol, UNTV News and Rescue, Malaysia. We serve the people, we give glory to God.
The Metropolitan Manila Development Authority or MMDA is planning to put up ferry terminals that will connect Rizal and Cavite through the Pasig River. JP Nunez will tell us why live. JP, go ahead.
Diego, MMDA Chairman Benhur Abalos said they are now in talks with the Laguna Lake Development Authority for the extension of the Pasig River ferry service route to Rizal and Cavite. This is to give commuters in Metro Manila an alternative and faster mode of transportation.
Para from Cavite, diretso ka na dito sa Intramuros. From Intramuros, dito ka na sa Pasig River. At pagkatapos sa Taytay na ginagawa ngayon, pwede ka na dumiretso ng Rizal hanggang Cardona. Imagine mo, kung magawa itong from Rizal to Cavite City, ang laking bagay po ito.
Regular passengers of the ferry were elated on the said plan, but some wants to focus on the ferry's queue length.
Sana po mas yung oras medyo iklian lang ng konti kasi medyo matagal-tagal yung isang oras sa pag-aantay. 30 minutes siguro pwede na.
Libre ito dito sa Pasig River, kanya lang ang waiting time is 1 hour. So inatasan ko po ang aming team na siguro within 2 months, give me 2 months, na dodoblihin ko ang fleet na ito.
Earlier, the Pasig River Ferry Service received a ferry donation from the New San Jose Builders Incorporated. The MB Vicente Ferry is a 50-passenger boat that has a route from Pasig to Manila. And that is our latest live. Back to you, Diego.
Thank you, JP Nunez, reporting live.
Meanwhile, the Department of Labor and Employment has announced that deployment of Filipino household service workers to the United Arab Emirates or UAE will resume at the end of the month. Ray Pelayo will tell us why.
The Department of Labor and Employment or DOLE announced the signing of a historic new labor accord between the Philippines and the United Arab Emirates, or giving greater protection to Filipino household service workers. Part of the agreement is the Philippine government's resumption of deployment of household service workers to the Emirates starting March 31. According to Philippine Delegation Head Undersecretary Claro Arellano, the new development will now be covered by a unified employment contract with provisions similar to the standard employment contract being used in Kuwait. Under the unified contract, both the employer and the foreign recruitment agencies and the Philippine recruitment agencies are bound by joint and solidary liability should anything happen to the Filipino workers. The four-party contract, which becomes addendum to the Memorandum of Understanding on Labor Cooperation with Annex Protocol on Domestic Workers, incorporates the President Rodrigo Duterte's instruction for specific provisions to ensure the safety and well-being of household workers as follows. The right of the domestic worker to take at least 8 continuous hours of sleep every night. The right of the domestic workers to take a break that is paid outside the residence of employer at least 1 full day every week. the right of the domestic worker to keep his or her passport or identification documents, and the employer is not allowed to hold them. The employer shall allow the domestic worker to have and use cellular phones and other communication devices, and the employer is prohibited from confiscating them. Opening of bank account under the name of the domestic worker for payment of salary, and allowing the domestic workers to cook her or his own food. The agreement was signed during the two-day joint committee meeting between countries held in Manila on Wednesday, with Saif Al-Suwaidi, Undersecretary of Human Resources and Emiratization representing the UAE. Another significant achievement in the meeting is the agreement on the conversion of tourist visit visa to working visa. As agreed, the Philippine Overseas Labor Office will be notified when a visit visa is converted to employment visa for a Filipino domestic worker. The Philippines reiterated its position to deploy the workers through the legal channel. Ray Pilayo, UNTV News and Rescue. We serve the people. We give glory to God.
The International Criminal Court announced that it was opening a formal investigation into allegations of war crimes committed by Israel and Palestinian militant groups in heavily disputed territories. Marvi Delfin will give us the details live. Yes, Marvi.
National Criminal Court's outgoing Chief Prosecutor Fatou Bensouda has declared yesterday that her office will formally look into Israeli military actions and settlement constructions on lands captured in the 1967 Mid-East War, as well as the events leading up to one of the deadliest conflicts in decades, the 2014 Gaza War. The decision was a move welcomed by Palestinian leadership and its supporters, but has infuriated the Israeli government and prompted swift rejection from Washington and Jerusalem.
The decision of the International Court to open an investigation against Israel today for war crimes is absurd. It's undiluted anti-Semitism and the height of hypocrisy. Without any jurisdiction, it decided that our brave soldiers, who take every precaution to avoid civilian casualties against the worst terrorists in the world, who deliberately target civilians, it's our soldiers who are war criminals.
The court ruled that the West Bank, the Gaza Strip, and East Jerusalem are in its areas of jurisdiction. In a statement, Bensouda said the investigation's central concern must be for the victims and their families, both Palestinian and Israeli, and it aims to be conducted independently, impartially, and objectively, without fear or favor of either party. The inquiry will focus on the indiscriminate rocket fire by Palestinian militant groups against Israeli communities, where 67 soldiers and 6 civilians were killed, as well as Israel's airstrikes, which resulted in the deaths of 2,200 Palestinians, including nearly 1,500 civilians. Bensouda named both the Israeli Defense Forces and armed Palestinian groups such as Hamas as possible perpetrators. Mariel, the International Criminal Court serves as a court of last resort when countries' own judicial systems are unable or unwilling to investigate and prosecute war crimes. However, Israel does not recognize its authority. Mariel?
All right, Marvi, thank you for that live report. A newspaper has reported that a former royal aide had made a bullying allegation against the Duchess of Sussex, Meghan Markle, but a spokesperson for the Duchess dismissed the report as a calculated smear campaign. Paul Gatchalian will tell us why.
The Buckingham Palace said on Wednesday that they will be investigating the allegations reported by the Times of London that Duchess drove out 2 personal assistants and left staff feeling humiliated. The official complaint was made by Jason Knopf, who was then the communications secretary to Meghan and Prince Harry and is now working for Harry's elder brother, Prince William. The Palace Human Resources team said in a statement that they will be seeking to speak to current and former staff regarding the circumstances outlined in the news article. The palace said it was very concerned about the allegations and they will not tolerate bullying or harassment in the workplace, referring to the dignity at work policy that has been in place in the royal household for years. Meanwhile, a spokesman for the Duchess said that as a target of bullying herself, Meghan was saddened by this attack on her character and is deeply committed to supporting those who have suffered from pain and trauma. The bullying allegations were reported only 4 days before the scheduled broadcast of Meghan's interview with Oprah Winfrey, which is expected to draw a huge audience. Paul Gatchalian, UNTV News and Rescue. We serve the people, we give glory to God.
Meanwhile, a giant iceberg larger than the size of most European cities has broken away from Antarctica near a British research station. This report explains why.
A massive iceberg called A74, measuring 1,270 square kilometers, came off the 150-meter thick Antarctica's Brunt ice shelf in a process called calving. Scientists had been expecting a huge chunk of ice to break away for almost a decade after the first vast cracks had formed on the shelf. The British Antarctic Survey said in a statement the events leading up to the major split began accelerating in November last year. Britain's Hawley 6 research station, which monitors the state of the vast floating ice shelf daily, is located about 20 kilometers from where the iceberg broke off. The research station was moved inland 4 years ago for safety reasons. What exactly caused this calving episode is yet to be deciphered by the experts. The official statement reveals that the ice break off due to natural reasons and they are yet to confirm if climate change played a role. Maria Latoza, UNTV News and Rescue. We serve the people, we give glory to God.
And those are the reasons behind the news in other parts of the globe. I am Maria Latoza, live from Perth, Australia. Good evening.
And those are the reasons behind the news, March 4, 2021. I am Harleen Delgado.
Reasons we deliver to you as they unfold. I'm Angelo Castro III.
Because we need to know, we will always ask why. I am William Theo. We serve the people. We give glory to God.